My thing is just being curious. I want to know how certain things work. Different business models, different business leaders, how are they approaching different challenges? And I just have a lot of fun with that.
Jason Kirby sold Liquid Sky software to Walmart 6 years ago, but became disillusioned when Walmart abruptly scrapped the company's ambitious plans. Seeking new direction, Jason joined Generation Esports, rapidly scaled it, and exited 3 years ago. This last exit prompted Jason to reassess his priorities, leading him to focus on family, health, and meaningful work. This shift inspired him to found Thunder, tech-enabled investment bank, and launch the Fundraising Demystified podcast. In this interview, Jason shares his journey from high-stress startups to a life centered on fulfillment and purpose. Hi, Jason.
Hello.
Hi. So good to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
No, I'm excited. It's a beautiful day on the ride over here, so I'm a happy guy today.
Fantastic. So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
You are very experienced with exits, your own, but also helping others. So I have lots of questions for you that I'm sure will be very interesting for my audience.
Happy to dive in.
Can we start with Liquid Sky?
Yeah.
And my first question is, how did you decide to start it, and what your motivation was to start it in the first place?
So the story of Liquid Sky, really stems from me selling my businesses in San Diego and moving to New York, and knowing that I had a vision in mind, but nothing really like set in stone. And upon arriving in New York, I was connected to an individual named Scott Johnston, who introduced me to this guy named Ian, who ended up being co-founder of Liquid Sky. And I was kind of run through quite a process of both me vetting Ian as a partner and the concept and the idea of what Liquid Sky could be. At the time, Ian was tinkering with this technology to enable what we call now cloud gaming, what we ultimately coined as interactive content delivery network. And I was just super passionate about what we could turn this into in terms of global access for people across the world that wanted access to a high compute performance machine that didn't have the means to shell out, thousands of dollars, or, people that could afford that money, but wanted the flexibility to pick up where they left off. I thought that was a noble mission and something that I was really excited about, and kind of got to craft that narrative. And so that's what kind of got me to be like, this is where I want to, plant my stake and dive all in. And ultimately it was Ian and I working out of his parents' house in Tarrytown for quite some time, kind of tinkering, getting this up and running, really working out what's going to attract a global audience for this product, and deploying data centers all over the world with our partners at IBM. And yeah, that's kind of where it all came from, getting connected to the right person, having a technology, but not really a business. And then kind of, I always, hindsight 2020, kind of where I see myself today, and kind of how I've kind of envisioned how I contribute to the entrepreneur ecosystem is I turn good ideas into great businesses. Yeah. So it's like I never was like the original idea guy. Yeah. Even anything and everything I created was someone kind of providing an idea. And then I'm like, okay, connect the dots. Okay, that's how it's a business. And then building the business.
So you were on the business side. You were the one who turned ideas into businesses.
Exactly.
So you wouldn't say you're necessarily a creative person, or that's your form of creativity?
That's my form of creativity. Yeah, I get joy out of coming up with, okay, there's something here. And this is what I do with my, my current day-to-day is like, okay, people are saying this, like, how do we make this into a product that is, or a company or a business model that can really achieve what we think it could achieve? And figuring out that equation is what kind of gets me excited. And that involves like deciding how much capital is needed to kind of get it to wherever it's going, and so on. So that's where I kind of found my superpower is like, okay, an idea is an idea. Yeah. Anyone has those, but what's the spark of that idea that can turn it into a real business?
That's a very versatile skill. I see people like that moving from different industries into different industries all the time and changing their focus very successfully, while people who are more of experts in a particular industry may have much harder time after exit going into something completely different.
Yeah, if you look at my background, I am so scattered across industries, products, sectors, business models.
Are you comfortable with that? Because a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed somebody who said it was their biggest regret that they didn't just focus on one thing and stuck to it.
You know, most business advice I've seen is be the best at one thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel that resonates with a lot of people. And I struggle with that a lot because I also know a lot of entrepreneurs that are the ones that are like scatterbrained and jump all over the place. And albeit they might have some mental difficulty with something like that, they still find ways to succeed.
Yeah.
My thing is just being curious. I want to know how certain things work. Mm-hmm. Like my wife makes fun of me for all the YouTube videos I watch of just like how random things work, from like DIY projects at my house during COVID to like, you know, different business models, different business leaders. How are they approaching different challenges? And I just have a very unique ability to kind of take like 10, 20% of the data that's being shared and be able to comprehend 80% of the narrative, or the opportunity or the narrative or the business very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I just have a lot of fun with that. It's just like a fun thing for me to kind of experiment with and dive into different projects with that kind of sense of curiosity, the desire to want to learn and understand from an expert, someone that has chosen one path, one thing, and being able to extract those types of stories and information from them.
That's brilliant. So if we go back to Liquid Sky, so I find it super impressive that you guys sold the company 3 years after you started it. How did that happen?
So we were basically managing a house of cards at the end of the day. We were burning way too much money, way too fast. We were go big or go home. And our largest investor at the time was Samsung Next. And so Samsung's like US venture arm. And we just knew that they were going to buy us. It was just such perfect alignment. All our demos, everything we did with Samsung devices. And we were just so dead set on driving all the numbers, all the narrative, everything towards that outcome. All B2C. We were just focused on like get as many customers across the globe as possible, because Samsung's global presence, their devices are ubiquitous, you know, everywhere. And if we could just have them acquire us and be an app, like a default app on every, and they have the server infrastructure, all it was just like the perfect partner. And so we were like, I think probably about a year and a half in, Samsung had invested, and they were also kind of like starting the conversation about acquisition. So we were just like, let's just keep this narrative going. They'll acquire us by the end of the year. This is 2017. And let's just go as fast as possible. Unfortunately, we got that acquisition offer. We're in diligence. Everything's looking great. Acquisition offer is phenomenal. It's just, me, my partner, the board, and like 2 employees that know about this deal. And at the time, we're about 40 people, I think, going from just Ian and I to 40 people in about 18 months. Just while everything was just crazy fast and tons of fun. I was learning. I was way over my head in terms of like what I was doing, but ultimately Samsung comes to the offer. Everything looks great. Everything on paper is phenomenal. Investors are happy, like except one, and we ultimately start pursuing that relationship. So come November 2017, for those that might remember, Samsung had a bit of a regime change, and the CEO went to prison for corruption, and that was in the midst of us closing. We were projected to close before Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow.
And we were like all marching towards that. Well, shortly before the whole hiccup with the CEO, our board decided that we weren't getting enough from Samsung. They wanted to go back to the well. Ian and I were like, no, let's march forward with this acquisition. Everything's great. Like we're very much like, because we're just pumping everything into growth to have a strong narrative into the acquisition, and knowing that if there's any delays, we weren't ready for that. Board still persisted and pushed the counter. Samsung balked, and they're like, what is this? And it delayed us a couple weeks. And nothing came of it except some slightly disgruntled, parties. But then that whole regime shift happened. So CEO gets fired, all this big news. We're like, Samsung Next is like, don't worry, the deal's still going through. They like reassure us. They were amazing. We love them over at Samsung Next and the team there. And so we just like, all right, let's keep going. But ultimately, the new CEO got signature authority. I think it was like on December 8th, the day of closing. So we have already, told, we work at the time. We'd already said, we're canceling our lease. We're moving into the Samsung office. They already set up the office for us. We had bottles of champagne ordered. We have everything on ice over at the new office. We have all this like food catering, scheduled for the next morning. And it was like the morning of December 8th or like first week of December 2017. And we get a text at like 2 a.m. From Korea saying the deal is dead. The new CEO has signature authority officially as of 8 a.m. this morning Korea time, and he has decided to kill every deal. Every deal over $1 million within the entire global organization is now killed or on pause for them to do an investigation. Yeah. And again, Samsung can do whatever they want. Yeah. Wow. Like,
oh wow! Must have been such a shock for you.
Oh my God! When we didn't even know what to do. Like
especially given that you built the business from the beginning for that. Oh my God!
For that exact outcome. So it was just like, just so stressful. So like we didn't and the whole team, we tell them to be there at 9 a.m. Our team never showed up at 9 a.m. They were always there like 10, 11, and then they worked till like 7 or 8 or whatever. And we tell them like, show up at 9 a.m. sharp. We had buses showing up at I think 10:30 to pick them over, take them to the new office. We had to give out all the offers within that hour and a half. We had to announce it. So we had this whole like agenda through the day. And then, Ian that morning, we were like, what do we do? He just sat in his office and he just couldn't talk. And keep in mind, only 2 other employees know what's actually going on. And they didn't know. They were like so excited to tell the news because everyone's getting these like pretty good offers. Like we saw all the offers were phenomenal. Yeah. And, I had to make something up because like, we can't tell them about the acquisition. Can't tell them that just fell through. We can't it's just all the restraints around what we do. So I was just like, all right, everyone, I hope you're really excited for our Christmas party in 3 weeks. One of our employees was like, can we have it in 3 weeks? She had no idea. I was just like, had to like architect this, and everyone's so like disappointed and like upset with us because we couldn't tell them what was going on because we didn't know ourselves and we didn't want to mislead them it was just so much of that kind of employee psyche that you have to manage. So that was incredibly stressful, but fortunately, Walmart had reached out about 3 weeks prior. And
they did themselves.
They reached out to us, and one of their team members had just inquired, just like, hey. Yeah. We're thinking about doing something in gaming. We'd love to have a chat. Yeah. And we ignored him because I had a conversation, but we delayed the meeting because we knew we were going to get acquired and we didn't want to like ruffle feathers. What's the first thing I do? Pick up the phone and call him. So that was December 2017. And basically we had to pivot the whole business because one, we had to raise like an atrocious round that just obliterated the team in terms of stock and everything like that because we were going to run out of money by January. Yeah. So it eradicated a lot of what would have been an awesome outcome with Samsung to survival, and we have to drive this to a very quick exit as quickly as possible. So I turned off my marketing hat to my sales hat and started selling enterprise customers a new technology that we kind of just repurposed our marketing to be more for enterprise and started selling like 6-figure, 7-figure contracts to like Walmart, LG, KT Telecom, all these things. And it was just one whole new skill, never sold enterprise technology before, and having to like learn that and figure that out. And then eventually just maintaining that relationship with Walmart, eventually rolling out some like concepts for Walmart gaming, at the same time doing it for Verizon. And ultimately Walmart was like, all right, this is something we want to make a bet on. They came in with what I felt was a fair offer, but a very disappointing offer compared to what Samsung was putting into the table. And at the end of the day, we were just like, this is an exit. and we are not sustainable, especially because like Amazon rumors were going on that they were working on something, Google was working on something, Microsoft's working on something, and we needed a big bankroll to survive. So we decided to push the narrative towards Walmart, kind of tease this narrative that Verizon was at the table because we were publicly working on something with them. And that ultimately drove the acquisition a lot faster than it would have otherwise. And probably is what got it punched over the line. Always have two parties. Always have two parties involved. Walmart ended up coming in and buying us and kind of being our savior. Yeah. It was insanely stressful trying to figure all that out and cut our burn, lay off people, and like reprioritize the business and still keep everything afloat. Like everything's okay, but everything's on fire. It was.
How did it feel then being with Walmart? Because you stayed for 2 years, didn't you?
Sort of.
So
at Walmart, basically the whole narrative for Walmart was they were trying to invest in, Walmart gaming. That was what we were supposed to bring to the table. And I was in love with the concept. They gave us a monster budget to go do it. I was leading all these amazing conversations, learning all these new skills. It was fun. And also there's no break because also I didn't get all the proceeds right up front. It kind of came out over the 2 years with them. And so I was just so hungry after the acquisition to make this as successful as possible, like put my name on this and like say that we did this. So for 6 months after the acquisition, we are just scaling, building, negotiating, flying all over the country. And it was just it was super exciting, but just, again, like chaos, and also me navigating a big corporate life, which was unique. I think to Walmart's credit at the time, they matched our pace and they gave us resources. They were really trying to pull back restraints and not add more, which I respect the team a lot there. What we didn't realize was a lot of that talent that was involved in that was a part of the Jet acquisition, and their tenure, like their earnouts were up in a couple months. And so they were trying to push all this forward. They were trying to make all this happen, but they all started dropping like flies because their tenure was up. Yeah. And so we're now dealing more with Bentonville than we are kind of East Coast, West Coast people. And there's just different culture. Everyone I met were amazing people. I have nothing bad to say about Walmart. But it was just very disheartening when we started seeing them drop off and they were our leaders in this stuff. Yeah. And when that started happening, there was a big decision from Walmart to basically stop all this future cool stuff that we were doing, divest from all that and reinvest in the next day delivery and same day delivery to compete with Amazon, which smart decision for them, sucked for us because that was our budget. And about 6 months after the acquisition, about 5 days before, about a week before our big announcement at the big gaming conference called E3 in LA, we had spent $5 million on this launch party. And that was just the deposit. Wow. That was just the deposit. That was it was going to be like 12 million probably all in. And that's like more than we raised as a company. And we're doing it for a 3-day launch party. It was going to be cool. It was actually pretty cool. I wish we could have brought that to life. That would have been really awesome. But right before we went live and told the whole world about Walmart gaming and releasing it to hundreds of thousands of customers right off the get-go, they just pulled the plug, shut it down. Way. They just said,
like Samsung did before.
Exactly. The rug pulls in my career have been painful. They basically just decided that this budget has been removed and that it's just stopped. And again, like to them, it's a drop in the bucket. $12 million isn't even, no one cares about $12 million at Walmart when they're managing $500 billion in revenue or whatever it was. So to them, it doesn't matter, but to us, it was everything. Yeah. And so that was really disheartening. And they physically actually put us on what I consider the roof. If anyone's familiar with the TV show Silicon Valley, where you go to the big company and you put on the roof when you're no longer useful, there was like a co-working space above the Walmart office in New Jersey, and they literally put us in that office. No way. And they're like, all right, well, you're no longer like the cool, sexy thing that we were trying to keep top secret in the company, and we need the space that you guys are in, so we're just gonna move you up there. And they kept me on payroll and gave me, option to do something else in the organization. All management was super nice and trying to they all felt bad because they all wanted this to happen. I was just I was just in shock. I was angry. I was mad. I was confused. There was a lot of just intense emotions because again, just abrupt.
No, of course.
It was just and
the second time in a row.
Yeah. A year and a half later.
Because it's a short period of time. It's just a few years.
And we were just so excited about I got so bought into the mission and I drove the whole team around this mission. Got everyone super excited that we will be Walmart Gaming. Yeah. and ultimately Walmart Entertainment with video and all those other cool ideas that we were working on. And yeah, that was like a huge crushing blow. And I didn't know what I was like, not vindictive in any way, but I was just like, I was angry. I wanted like just to do something else right away and distract myself. So that trip we were supposed to do the launch party. So like this is like literally like a week later after the news. I go to San Diego instead, where I'm, most of my friends are. I grew up in San Diego, in Southern California, and just my friends kind of knew the whole story already, and they already had something waiting for me when I showed up, and they're just like, "There's this company we invested in. Like, you should check it out." And I was just like, "Sure, yeah, whatever." Like, just anything to get my mind off Walmart. Little I didn't know I was going to spend the next 2 years working on that. But
and that was Generation Esports.
That was Generation Esports, yeah. At the time, which was called High School Esports League. Not my company, not my idea. The company existed for years before I got there, but as a small business being led by, very passionate founders, 3 of them that really cared about bringing esports into the schools across America. I love that narrative, love that mission, and I was kind of adjacent in that space. I knew esports, knew the gaming world, knew the publishers from my time at Liquid Sky and Walmart, and so it was like a perfect fit. And so yeah, I just immediately just said, I know how to solve all their problems. I'm going to jump all in, and just did it as like consultant, but was working way too much, working way too hard, as if it was my company from like day one, because I just had all that energy.
Yeah, you had all this momentum, right?
And I just needed to put that to something as quickly as possible. So they were put in front of me like moment of all that going on. And I was like, that's where I'm driving all my energy.
Yeah.
That's when I'm going to make what I wanted to make at Walmart. And the founders were just like, cool. I don't think they knew what hit them when I came on. There's a whole story in terms of that, but they were doing about $100K a year when I showed up, and I was just like, this is way bigger. Every kid in America needs to have this as an option, as opposed to traditional sports, or to complement traditional sports, having esports as an outlet. So I kind of took again like the idea that they had that was like a passion project, and turned it into what eventually, by the time I left, was a $6 million annual run rate in 18 months. Or 2 years. Was it 2 years? Yeah, it was like 18, 20 months. So that's where I didn't even have time to reflect on the acquisition from Walmart. But the fun fact is, and why I say Walmart had me for 2 years, I was still on payroll. And they didn't care that I was doing anything else. They just wanted me not to disparage them or say anything bad about them. And they're just like, you do whatever you want. Just
interesting.
Just don't give us a bad name. Yeah, like don't give our M&A team a bad name. To which I don't. Like, I think they were phenomenal. I think they were a great partner. Just they made a business decision that affected me negatively. Yeah. But yeah, they kind of kept me on payroll. I got my earnout, got all that stuff without putting. I think I opened my Walmart laptop like once a month to check in something, just to make sure that I had like something I had to physically, like reports or something I had to submit for my team, and that was it. And it was like, that was my only contribution for Walmart during that entire time, and so it was awesome. And that also allowed Generation Esports to afford me, because I didn't care about the money, and worked for basically pennies in retrospect to scale their company, because it was just, I had all that energy, just like, this has to be applied to something that I care about as quickly as possible. So yeah, I didn't even really reflect on the acquisition outside of probably one night with Ian, when the deal was done, money was transferred. I think that was like probably the most important moment. But yeah, other than that, it was just full steam ahead on the next project once they pulled the plug for me.
But you mentioned to me before in a separate conversation that your existential crisis only happened after Generation Esports, because it got delayed by this momentum when you wanted to continue being busy.
Yeah. So I kind of dabbled for about a week or two before I went all, because Generation Esports was brought to me as a concept. I didn't meet with the team for probably a couple of weeks. So I was thinking, like, do I do consulting? Do I try to find something at Walmart? Do I try to start something new? I was like, or do I go do an MBA or something? Everyone slapped me in the face and said, "Don't do an MBA." So you have an MBA.
You have an MBA.
Yeah. So glad I listened to them, because not my cup of tea. But Yeah, so I jumped straight into Generation Esports, and I was blinders on. Nothing else mattered. My wife was like, "Where'd you go?" Like, because also it's middle of COVID too. It's like COVID happened shortly after me joining. Well, it was about 6 months later, 8 months later. So I was like fully vested into Generation Esports at the time, and then COVID happened, and we sell to schools, and like schools were shut down, and it was just all the challenges we dealt with in that moment were so intense. I was losing my hair like crazy. Just like the stress was like nothing else, but I had to drive this to like a successful outcome. That's like all that was on my mind. And, the founders and I would butt heads often because I was driving so fast and they weren't used to it. And I had to try to keep catching them up. So there's definitely that was building in the early days. But ultimately, the market's hot. We're growing like crazy. We're signing massive deals with sponsors and partners and signing schools. Like everything's up and to the right. It's great. We grew the team from like 8 people living on ramen to like a 65-person team with market salaries with a nice, big office and everything. And
impressive.
Yeah, it was great. I was loving it. But it was also like the hot market too. It was 2021, going into 2021. So it was all good. And we navigated the pandemic perfectly to come out on top. But ultimately what was interesting was we raised a Series A from Altos, successful VC firm, really liked them. They wrote $11 million check into our Series A, and the founders just changed overnight. Our attitudes, just our relationship just started to shift dramatically. And I didn't probably attend to them as much as I should have. That was one of my regrets. I should have been more conscious of the relationship I had with them, but I was just so dead set on this mission of driving absolute success that I kind of forgot that at the end of the day, it's their baby and they can do whatever they want with it. And that, it was like kind of the power of being the founder.
Yeah.
And albeit I was driving all the success, I was kind of taking away all their decision-making and just doing it myself and more or less running by the decisions by them. And it created a lot of tension. And also I wasn't there. I was in New York. I was flying back and forth. And just created a lot of tension in the relationship and that I wasn't prioritizing. People were giving me signs like, hey, you should probably do this. And I was like, no, we're like, look at the numbers. We're crushing it. And I don't need to slow down. That was kind of my attitude. And ultimately a decision came about to do a deal with a partner that I wholeheartedly just hard no. Like, this is a horrible deal. This could cripple the company. And it's, in my opinion, was very dishonest from the partner because they were saying yes to the CEO on what the CEO wanted, the founder, but what was actually in writing was very different. Like, it was very much a bait and switch. And I try to warn them and educate them, but they were so passionate about this partner and working with this partner that they basically said, we're going to do it. And I just exploded. And that's when it ended. I was just like, I can't do this. Like, my stress levels was just so high. My wife and I went on vacation. My wife was pregnant. And she's just like, I was on my phone the whole time. We're in Mexico City, like trying to have fun. And like, I did not have any fun. I was just so stressed about this. And ultimately came back and, we ended the relationship. And I decided that I want to sell my stock because I don't believe in this company anymore with the direction that they're going. And it was very, very tenuous and stressful. And it was very unfortunate because the business had so much potential. So, long story short, business still exists. They went on to raise some, additional capital, albeit I see it as a very different outcome than what would have been had I been there, but I think that doesn't matter. But it was at that moment where I'm like, it was just an abrupt stop. Like, this is over. I'm no longer doing this thing. I don't have anything else in the hopper to work on next.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what do I do now? Because I was so angry and mad that this happened, and it was no longer my baby. And like, again, like I wasn't the founder, but I felt like I was. Like, I felt like I really owned it, like that mindset, and I tried to give it everything I had, and it was just kind of taken away. And so ultimately, I tried to figure out what do I do next. So from that point on, this is, I think, May 2021. Yeah. Just started meeting with friends. That was like the number one thing I wanted to do. I just want to rekindle relationships, because I went off grid. I'd stopped hanging out with people as much as I used to, stopped connecting with people as much as I used to, because I was so immersed in the business, and just kind of took a month or two of nothing. Like, I did some real estate. I was like, okay, I can do real estate.
So you still had some of that momentum left, you feel, if you felt you needed to go into real estate, or that was driven by something else?
Well, I was already buying a property.
Oh, okay.
I was closing the week after everything went to shit. Yeah. So I was already in that deal. So I kind of just distracted myself with that deal and immersed myself in everything real estate. But outside of that, I was, that's not a full-time thing for me. And so I was just meeting with as many people as I could to kind of have a self-discovery. Like, who am I? What do I do? What am I good at? Do I want to do something again? What do I want to do? Do I want to just invest? Do I want to...
What did you find helpful?
Talking to people. Just having as many lunch chats, coffee chats as I possibly could. Back then, I wasn't like out every day on those things. It was like probably 1 or 2 a week. And, lots of conversations with my wife, trying to figure out, just what I do. And my wife's like obviously doing her own thing at work, and just kind of like, she's very supportive, but she was like, get back up on your feet. Come on, let's go. Come on. She didn't let me stay down for too long. I went back to the idea of doing an MBA, because it was like something I could just do. I could be like, I could do an MBA and I could figure it out later, kind of thing. So I started looking at that again, and but someone kind of challenged me to, like, look back at your old contacts, people you thought were interesting that you maybe never developed a relationship with deeper. And one of those people were the partners at Interplay Ventures, like a venture fund. And so I kind of just hit them up out of the blue. I haven't talked to them in years. I just like hit them up out of the blue and say, hey, I'm doing this thing now. Or I had done this thing, looking to do what's next. Like, can we have a chat? And that ultimately started sparking a lot of conversation. They kind of gave me oh, you're like a badass. Like, you can get shit done. Like, what are you doing sitting on your hands? Like, let's find something for you to apply your knowledge to. So that was helpful, because one is some external validation after going through what was pretty distraught.
Of course.
Because also I got connected to Generation Esports from my San Diego friends, and that whole relationship's kind of got a little, upended a little bit, or a little sensitive because of what happened with Generation Esports. So it was like, I felt like I couldn't truly tap that network as much. Like, a lot of people weren't impacted, but some of the key people were. So that was like a stressful thing. So I was like, all right, let me focus on building new relationships and exploring new conversations of things that are outside my comfort zone, and kind of seeing what comes of it. Did a lot of interviewed for various different jobs. Nothing that really like screamed out like, this is what I have to do. And I still didn't know what I wanted, so I wasn't even like crushing those interviews anyways, because I was just like, I don't know, like, I'm good. So I felt it was like an ingenuine interview process. So I was very quickly just dabbling into things and just not sitting idle.
What was the most painful thing for you? Not being busy, being bored, confused?
Angry. Yeah, I was angry. Just like, I understood it. Like, I know why, but I didn't like the reason why. And it took me a while to accept what was my fault in that arrangement. And just also the, like, kind of looking back at my past relationships of, co-founders and partners and stuff like that, what worked, what didn't work. I realized that, like, sometimes I beat to my own drum, and I don't always allow for my partners to get on the same rhythm, because I make decisions too quickly. I'm just going, and they might be going fast as well, but they're going on a different rhythm. And so that was something I had to like reflect on and take some time, because a lot of friends were kind of telling me that's like, hey Jason, like, have you thought of this? Like, blow them off. Like, no, like, I was right. But again, like, with time and a couple months of just kind of like analyzing, reflecting, and kind of having an emotional experience, kind of reflecting like, okay, I wasn't perfect. I was not right in every single situation, albeit the business numbers were great. Everything was up and to the right. I could have managed those relationships better and still got the same, if not a better outcome. And I think that's where a lot of my head and time and space went, of just figuring out those relationship dynamics. And why I was like, it wasn't just naturally that I was like trying to figure out like, what do I do next? And kind of having that diagram of like, what do I like, what do I not like, and what am I good at, kind of thing. And just going back through that process. Cause it's still like, I'm young. What am I actually? I don't know what I'm 36. I still have so much ahead of me and so much opportunity. Like I'm not going to be sitting idle. And that was something I kind of committed to pretty early. Yeah. So it was really about figuring out like, okay, whatever I do next, I want to be able to do for a very, very long time and enjoy. And that's kind of where my head and my time and my thought process went.
So your decision to start Thunder, were you still angry at the time, or there was a different reasoning?
I had a different perspective. So I met with the partners at Interplay, and they were the ones that ultimately planted the seed that got me like, okay, maybe I do my own thing. And, I like the idea of working with them because they were partners or co-founders, but they're not in it with me every day. So I have like autonomy and control, but I don't have to like, cater to their personalities and needs. Like it's a business relationship, but we're good friends. We have a lot of mutual respect, but I don't have to be worried about their execution abilities or any of that kind of stuff. So when they kind of planted that seed in my head, it was still pretty early and I was not ready for it. And also the original seed for Thunder was like not that enticing. But I like the idea of having like investors and partners and like accountability buddies effectively. Cause I felt like I didn't want to do something 100% alone again. Cause I did that in my previous businesses when I was younger. I was all alone on everything and it just wasn't fulfilling as much. It was a good lifestyle, I could do whatever I want, but I felt I had a much lower ceiling when I did stuff by myself.
Do you mind telling my audience what Thunder does?
Yeah, sure. So basically Thunder came about, it was, the idea was planted in my head around creating like a matching platform for investors and founders. I've seen them use those types of platforms. They kind of suck. And at the end of the day, investors invest based on relationships. You can give all the AI and all the data you want, but at the end of the day, especially venture, it's a finger in the wind. How do I feel? Do I want to bet on this person? I want to bet on this person, especially like early stage stuff. But that was the original concept. But I started, it took me about 2 to 3 months to kind of like sit on the idea, and all this other things I told you about was going through my head, and all this kind of like existential crisis stuff that I was going through. That seed was like kind of getting nurtured a little bit in terms of like what ultimately turned into is like, wait, I can have a business where I get to work with incredibly smart, passionate, driven people and be a support person to them, help them take off one of their most important and more difficult things to do, raise capital, access capital, plan for capital events and things of that sort, M&A. I get to leverage something that I have experience in that, I felt I was really good at in the previous businesses. And I could technically do this forever. And I get a fresh batch of, businesses and clients and things of that sort that, keep me on my toes, force me to learn new industries. And I was like, all right, that sounds fun. I was like, I think I could do that. How do I get there? How do I prove myself? How do I validate this? We'll see. But I have a little bit of a track record, but as far as doing this as a service was unique to me. And of course, this is like peak market. So at the end of the day, we decided that Thunder would be a tech-enabled investment bank. And we say tech-enabled in the sense that we provide a bunch of free tools, technology. We have our kind of own AI. It's basically an algorithm that identifies probabilities of interest from investors to help founders kind of navigate who they should prioritize building relationships with. It's not we scored high, they're going to invest. It's like, no, there's so many other variables that you can't take into consideration with data that need to be factored in. And so that's where the service comes in mind. So we use our own products to kind of help service our clients, and we give it away for free to anyone else to kind of help navigate how they should pursue relationships. But ultimately, our real value and what we really do is help companies source, debt, equity, or kind of advise for M&A, and help them figure out what their real options really are, help them reset expectations, especially all the ones drunk on 2021 of like, oh, these guys raised, $100 million. It's over now. Like, let's get back to reality. Let's, So I've had a lot of fun doing that. I've met some amazing founders, and that's what I really get to enjoy myself waking up every day and doing.
You also have a fantastic podcast, Fundraising Demystified, which I highly recommend for everyone to listen to. I think it's very practical. It solves specific problems, and it trains people in a very practical way to do what they need to do. How did that idea come to your mind?
So the original idea, again, peak 2021, my wife's pregnant. I wasn't ready to like go all in on like 80-hour weeks or anything like that, because I wanted to be there for my wife, wanted to be there for my kid. So I was just like working on like a little bit of the product and kind of chipping away at things. Little did I know the market was going to collapse underneath us. And I was like, wow, I should have probably ramped up the business a little bit faster, capitalize on that timing. But ultimately, the business, market went to absolute, bottom. And so I started figuring out like, okay, how do I maximize this time? Because doing deals right now are just not going to happen. And that was like the premise of the business. Like, we want to, close deals, and that's how we're going to be compensated, to create a incentive alignment. And so I was like, all right, well, how else can I spend my time? So we optimized and really focused on product during that time, and kind of creating this free tool for people. And then ultimately really focusing on content. So we started with the newsletter, the Fundraising Demystified newsletter. Everything's on Thunder.vc, but we started with Fundraising Demystified newsletter, thousands of subscribers, what we kind of started with, like my networking people and stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay. But really with the premise of like, how do we stay in touch? How do we stay relevant? How do we stay top of mind? That was really the objective I was trying to solve. And then that's how we figured that out, was newsletter. But then I was like, okay, newsletter's one thing, but I need like, I want to have conversations with people, like this kind of stuff. Like there's just so much value in being able to sit down with amazing people and extract, their very specific things. And as I was dealing with founders, it's like there's so much misconception around what's in the TechCrunch and strictly VC of like, these company raised this much money, this company raised this much money, and all these founders that are adjacent to that, they sit there and just paint an invisible, this like unrealistic expectation of what's happening. Like, in reality is venture capital is not nearly as glamorous as people think it is. And so I decided, I was like, you know what? There's a ton of podcasts out there that interview the person that became a billionaire, the person that became, 10 years ago they were in the position of these founders that are listening to the podcast. And I was like, what would it be like to have a podcast where people are actually in the thick of it right now, closing rounds right now? Yeah. Then what are those, what's happening to them? Like, what's different? And I've had such a diverse group of founders, from like, it took us 2 years to raise $1 million to then finally get to like raise a proper round. And then, people are like, I just called a couple buddies and raised like 20 million. It's just like the whole gamut, just to kind of really, why that's why I call it demystify, because it's just so not transparent. And everyone's trying to boast what makes them look good. Because that's the name of the game. Like, the truth of like all of our Walmart raise and all that kind of stuff, it's all like all the positive stuff, when we put out to the world, like, we raised $12 million. Da, 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 da. It's like, but what are the terms and how that actually impact the founder and stuff like that? But being that the founders are still in the business and they're still operating, it's like, how did you run the business and a fundraising process at the same time? Like, what are some practical ways to look at it, and all these different personalities, different businesses, different industries? So that's kind of, I was just very curious of like solving that narrative and like providing that narrative to founders that are in the thick of it right now, trying to figure out what's practical advice, not, Brian Chesky, who, like his failed pitch deck, all his failure notes and all that kind of stuff from like 2009. It's just, it's cool and inspiring, but it's a different market. It's a different environment these days.
So let me ask you something that's relevant to my audience. As you know, in our post-exit founder community, lots of people are considering starting a new business. And then, of course, the next question is, should I use my money or should I raise money? Because we feel, and I was there as well, we feel, okay, now we can actually afford not having to spend time raising money. We also can keep all the control. So there are so many reasons not to raise money if you have your own after an exit. What would your advice be to a person like that?
It's a great question. So there's two perspectives. One, personal investment thesis or your family office thesis, whatever it is, does it account for a high threshold of risk in terms of capital allocation? And like looking at yourself personally and just being like, are you over allocated into one asset, and are you comfortable with that? I think that's something that some founders I meet, they accumulate tons of wealth and they park it in like, interest bearing account, whatever, like they get their 5%, they live off that and they're comfortable. Where other ones want to just like pile it back into another high growth opportunity. So it's really, I think the first question is risk tolerance. Like I'm working with a client right now that has that same problem. They have all their own money. They could put all their own money into it, but it's sizable. In this case, it's it's a very sizable mid 8-figure deal, and but they want to de-risk it. So bringing in outside capital partners, I think, adds accountability and adds resources and attention and a different element to things that ultimately create enterprise value. Also make it more accessible for acquiring talent. When you get to say these other people are involved, there's a whole talent acquisition strategy around fundraising or working with fundraising partners. But from a founder's perspective of, I can afford this, I'm comfortable with this, and I can do it all, versus do I go and bring other people along with me? It just depends on the personality. Like, do you want full control? And are you comfortable with what comes with that, versus do I want accountability buddies? Do I want people to come with me? Do I want people to grow with me? It's actually a chat happening right now in the PEF group of just like, do they do it all on their own? Do they bring co-founders in? And I was kind of in the in-between camp. I wanted investors. I wanted to be accountable to a board, but I didn't want someone sitting next to me that could disagree and like go a different path and be split on something. So that was how I decided to do Thunder. But with other founders I've seen, ultimately comes down to risk tolerance of putting their primary capital at risk for the new business and how comfortable they are doing it, and in what structure do they do it in. That's the other thing of just like, do you just keep loaning your company money, and also I guess actually asking yourself really like, what do you want the outcome to be? Do you want a cash flowing business? Do you want a big exit business? And if you want a big exit business, you want a venture scale business, I always push people towards bring on the partners that have a more diverse experience and exposure to that world, as opposed to like look at what's his face, the WeWork founder, like Adam Newman, like bringing in A16Z into his deal. Like he had plenty of money, but he brings in the big names to give him the big splash. So it's just like everyone has kind of their own reasons, but I think asking yourself really what you want the outcome to be. If you want a cash flowing business that creates a wonderful lifestyle for you, then do not bring in investors. Like that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But if you want to go big, happy we'll join you on the journey.
Yeah, because I've been collecting post-exit stories now for 13 years, and it's my observation that the most exit wealth by far is lost in situations when people are trying to build much bigger businesses, putting just their own money in, and being overconfident, and then completely underestimating how their own motivations will change over time. And then you meet people, they don't like talking about it, but in a private conversation, they will admit that they're 5-6 years into this new business, they couldn't care less about it, they lost excitement about it, they keep putting money into it, they can't raise money for it because their heart isn't in it, and the business is not doing well, and then they keep doing it because also it's very hard to close a business like this for years, and then you see the biggest losses. Sometimes people lose the whole wealth they got from previous exit through that, which is why I was so excited to kind of hear your perspective on that. Should people stop and think, maybe even though I have money and even though I want control, I should be a little bit more careful?
Yeah, I think it's something that people really have to sit down and ask themselves. Like even founders that either have money or don't have money, I always start with that question, like what's the end game? Because what partners you bring on with you, whether they're co-founders, equity partners, debt partners, like everyone, you kind of want to be aligned on where this ship is going and kind of have your North Star. And for some people it's, I want a huge exit. Some people want an IPO. Some people are like comfortable lifestyle, business, cash flow. And if you can't answer that question confidently towards your business, like I think you should probably slow down on whatever you're doing and answer that question first, because that changes who you can attract, whether it's talent, investors, partners, clients, customers. Like if you don't have that mindset already in place and that goal in place, it can end up like those situations where you just kind of keep funneling money into things because you don't really know where it's going or what the outcome's going to be, and you don't know what life is like without it, and you just kind of keep doing it.
Yeah, and it often happens exactly because people don't stop and think for a while what it is they want. And then years later, they're like, oh, I should have started a cash flow business. Or I should have just traveled the world and ignored my money or turned into passive investing.
Yeah, no, it
happens a lot.
Yeah, that's why, the first part is like, what do you need to survive? If you have the means, what do you need to be comfortable, and making sure you don't touch that and keep that aside. But yeah, I see some people just pile it right back into the next thing, all in.
Yeah, and they're very excited for a while, and then they keep telling everyone everything's fine. And then in private conversations, they're like, I shouldn't have done it. The phrase, I underestimated the psychological effects of an exit, is the most common one I hear in these situations, because sometimes you just need to address yourself a bit before moving on.
Yeah, I definitely need to give myself as much time as I probably should have. But for me, it's like I feel like I have so many years ahead. I just steamroll ahead. But I think for everyone, it's kind of like having that self-reflection, that time to acknowledge that things are going to be different. Your baby's gone. I think for me, it was also different that my time at each business was shorter. So if I were at Liquid Sky for 15 years, I'd probably be feeling different. Which I feel like that's kind of been the correlation between some of the founders that I've met with and had these conversations with. If it was their life's work for at least, I would say, like 8 to 10 years, the existential crisis is much, much bigger than for those over a shorter period of time.
So you said that your advice is to think what your plan is for your business when you started. So what's your plan for Thunder?
So it's basically a lifestyle business. I love the idea that I get to work with founders and build something of value and help them solve these problems. I get to choose who I work with. I constantly turn down people, just like either from the idea they're working on or the business or the opportunity or whatnot. I don't feel like I have to work with anyone, which is nice. I get to like pick and choose. Albeit I probably could be signing a lot more business and, growing the business to have more staff a lot faster. And part of me wants that because I do thrive better in like a slightly bigger organization. But I also want to be selective with who I work with and have that choice. So for me, it's like, I think this could be a very comfortable and sizable business, especially as we kind of scale up our clientele with the capital raises that we're doing. But it really comes down to making sure I control how much I put in and who I get to work with is more important than getting as big as possible. Like, I love the idea of like, maybe I'll steal business from JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley one day in investment banking. But, those shower thoughts get into my head in terms of what we could do one day if we just continue to execute. Yeah. But it's less so much that being the goal, is more so of like choosing good people to work with and staying nimble, staying educated, getting to learn, and staying curious.
So why wouldn't you jump into another big business with a big IPO goal?
I know what it takes. And I rather help the people that want to do that and be like a support role than be the person in those shoes again. Mainly because I know the strain it puts on a relationship and family. I love my wife and my daughter very much and hope to have, another daughter or another child at some point. And, I've kind of rooted my priorities in family. and part of the reason why I moved here. And that's kind of the underlying decision across the board. And I know what I went through to not get an IPO with Generation Esports, like the stress, what I put into that. It's like, that would not be sustainable with my daughter. And also I love supporting my wife in her career. She's, more the corporate junkie, loves that stuff. And she's moved up the ladder, exceedingly fast, at her company. And I love, that's her passion. That's what she wants to do. So I want to make sure that it's not all about my career all the time, which it was in the, first several years of our relationship. So it's kind of like her opportunity to kind of have her outlet. So I think that's also part of the decision.
So it basically sounds like there are two factors. One is that you were kind of traumatized by the last 6 years of your life building these businesses at enormous speed, right? And the second one is just the moment in your life when you're having a young family and you want to focus on it and give your wife more attention and support.
Yeah, and I think, maybe things change dramatically when my kids get older and,
of course.
They're more independent and I might want to go big again. But I think in this moment, young family, I see again, immersing yourself with other founders and other people in the ecosystem is so important for me. I got an amazing introduction to entrepreneurship in college, being immersed with all these very successful entrepreneurs, like billionaires, 100 millionaires, and they come and talk to us and they talk about all their success. This is probably still one of the most transformational meetings of my entire life. I was 21, I think, or 22. Founder I'm looking up to is, billionaire, he's old. And, one of my fellow friends asked, what's your biggest regret? I was I would throw it all away to have more time with my family.
Jason, thank you so much. This was great.
No, thank you. Those are very thought-provoking questions.
Good. I'm happy. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.